Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Bancock Bareback. Of course, is your host with the most. I don't actually have a name, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, how you doing? Probably you don't care. That's a dumb question. Today we're going to be talking about monarchies. Well, why are we talking about monarchies? So, we're going to be bringing up three major monarchies across the world. One's with a personal union with 14 or 15 other countries. Forgot how many countries it is, but I know the Bahamas, the United Kingdom, Canada, they all have one monarch technically, meaning ruled by one that's a lifetime, that's higher, that is born into it. It's weird. It's a weird system. We'll go over that probably a little bit, but basically there's a king, King Charles. He's King Charles III in the United Kingdom. In other countries he might be King Charles I because he might be the only Charles they've ever had. So I don't know at that point, but they think they still call him King Charles III in other countries, or maybe he's King Charles II. I don't know. Doesn't matter, right? Whatever his name is, King, whatever, right? King Charles, whatever. In every country, he's probably King Charles, right? So Canada, Papua New Guinea, Australia, New Zealand, any Anglophone country, any country that's influenced by the British. Some of them have the monarchy. Obviously, the United States got rid of the monarchy a long time ago because of the revolution. So a lot of countries went through a revolution and they got rid of the monarchy. India went through an independence period, the partition of India, things like that. So Pakistan and India are no longer part of the monarchy. They're still part of the Commonwealth of Nations, but they're not part of the Commonwealth realms. So it's weird, right? There's the Commonwealth of Nations, which is like a bunch of random countries where the figurehead is the king, but he's not the figurehead of each individual country, but then the Commonwealth realm is. Commonwealth realm, like Canada, the head of state is the king, but the head of government is the prime minister. Although you could argue that the head of state is technically the governor general of each individual country, except for the United Kingdom, because they don't have a governor general because they have the king, who is representing himself. So there is no governor general in the United Kingdom. But that being said, there's a governor general in Jersey, Guernsey, and Isle of Man, even though they are sovereign. They're the same sovereignty as the United Kingdom. They are separate countries. It's weird. They have the same sovereignty as the United Kingdom, but they use different parliaments. And they almost act like Puerto Rico, except they're more detached from Puerto Rico to the United States. It's kind of hard to explain. But basically, the Commonwealth realm is a very complicated subject. But basically, the king is the head of state of all these countries, but their respective prime ministers or heads of government are their leaders, technically, locally anyway. But they all have governor generals as well, who's supposed to represent the monarchy locally. And in Canada, I know they have lieutenant governors. I'm not certain on how Australia works. I know that each state in Australia has a governor, which is completely different from a lieutenant governor. Don't get those confused. Like a lieutenant governor in Canada and a governor in Australia are two different things. A governor in Australia, I think, is just the head party of the parliaments of each state, respective state, which is kind of interesting, but yeah, whatever. It's weird. Anyway, let's move on to another monarchy because I'm kind of tired of talking about the Commonwealth realms. Let's talk about the UAE. So the UAE, there are 7 monarchs because each state is its own monarch, and it's called a shaf basically. And each emirate is controlled by an emir, but now they call it a shafe. So it's weird. The term emir and shafe can be interchangeable. But yeah, the United Arab Emirates, right? There's 7 of these guys. Now there's 6 royal families, but one royal family owns 2 states, and there's two people that from the same family owns the 2 states. It's weird, but basically, these 7 Emirates united to a single federation, basically. And then the 7 kings or emirs, whatever you call them, the monarchs, will decide who will become the president of the UAE, and it's one of the 7, obviously. But normally when they appoint the president, I don't know how long the term is, but normally they serve for life. They just keep electing the same king from the same state. I think it's always either the biggest or the second biggest state. Vice president's always been the same state, so it's weird. They'll just keep re-electing the same guy over and over again. It's not a very competitive election because there's only 7 people in it, but presidents act like kings because they serve for, they could serve up to 30 to 40 years in the UAE. I'm sure that another state could take the position, but I've only ever seen 2 or 3 presidents in the UAE's history, which is fascinating. Now, there's a country very similar to UAE, the way it functions, where they also have an election for, it kind of acts like a president, but they call it the King of Malaysia. And Malaysia is very similar to UAE. There's a federation of kings, or a federation of local rulers, I guess I could say, local monarchs. I don't understand, like, if you're in a federation of monarchs, does that mean you're a monarch? Does it truly mean you're a monarch? Because if you're living among other monarchs, right? A monarch means one, but there's other monarchs in your country. That means there's no rule of one in one country. It's a rule of many. I mean, rule of some, I guess. So, I mean, obviously a monarch can never rule alone. It's pretty obvious it would never be able to work. But, thinking of it, right? Malaysia is so interesting to me because I think there's 4 states that have governors, and the King of Malaysia, who serves 5 years, by the way, he doesn't serve life. He's one of the few monarchs I can think of that serves only 5 years instead of lifetime. I don't know any other monarch that serves for only 5 years. That is so weird to me. But anyway, there's a federation. It's a federation of kings, kind of, in Malaysia. However, some states don't have kings and have to be appointed by the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and the king will sign off on it, proving the governor of those 4 states. So those states are very hierarchical anyway, because even though they don't have monarchs in those individual Malaysian states, some of them, the governor is sort of selected by the Prime Minister and the king. So it's a little weird. But that being said, the 9 royal houses in Malaysia that are not republic states in Malaysia, pick one of them. Every family will just rotate. So every 5 years there'll be a new family, and after 45 years you can get the same spot again. But it takes a freaking long time. So technically you can only serve for 2 times if you live long enough. That is, if you live well into your 80s, you can luckily serve 2 times as king of Malaysia, or 90s actually. You might have to be in your 90s honestly if you want to serve as king of Malaysia. I don't even know, but your chances of being that king again, you have to wait the 45 years. It's so interesting because it rotates between every single family, and it just keeps going. It's sort of an election for these 9 royal families, but in practice it's more of a wheel just goes. It's so fascinating. Anyway, it just, to me, I find monarchies to be fascinating, and I find monarchies that are united in a personal union or even a federation just to be a very weird thing. I know that in history, there's always been personal unions, like I know with the United Kingdom. Before they had the personal unions with Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, they had a personal union with a part of the Holy Roman Empire. The king of the United Kingdom was the king of Handover. King George III, I believe, was the king of Handover. Which is fascinating that he was the king of both the American colonies, which rebelled against him, and Handover, which arguably didn't really speak very good English. They spoke German. I'm sure that King George III probably spoke German too, with the subject. So it's kind of fascinating just to read up on it. It's just so interesting. Personal unions, in my opinion, are such interesting things to think about. Another thing to think about too is the Belgian. This is another one that's kind of fascinating. It's a federation. It's also a monarchy. Belgium. Belgium's one of the few monarchies I can think of that's like a federal, that's separate from the Commonwealth, where the king is descended from the Germans. Now the Germans only make up like 1% of Belgium, but the other 2 groups in Belgium are the Flemish and the Wallonians. The Flemish obviously speak like a dialect of Dutch, probably. And the Wallonians, well, they definitely speak French. Most people would argue that it's not really a separate language. So, the Flemish and the Wallonians have fought with each other for, hundreds of years, yet they're still united under that same Belgian flag, or Belgian government, I guess, since 1830, which, to be fair, it's not that old of a country. But the fact that the British made a random country called Belgium, or the Belgian Revolution sort of happened, and the British are like, okay, we'll make you into a country. Everyone sort of agreed to it. Is really funny. Because they had no reason to disagree with it. They didn't want Germany to have it, and they didn't want France to have it, so they just made it into a separate country. But it makes more sense for the Netherlands to have it, but nobody wanted the Netherlands to have it. for some reason. I don't know why. It would honestly have been really good if they did, but I think it was more of a religious issue. I don't really know. But, like, that is so fascinating to me, how personal unions are so fascinating. But, like, the monarch sort of acts as a personal union between all three groups in Belgium. The Germans, the Flemish, and the Wallonians. He's sort of the uniting person in that weird federal monarchy, even though he's supposed to represent the Germans. I think he speaks more French than German, because in Belgium they speak way more French. It's kind of interesting. Andorra is another great one. Andorra is a diarchy, so it doesn't really count in this as a monarchy, but we might as well talk about it. They're called co-princes, and they act like royalty, I guess. The co-princes are the president of France, who's a Republican figure in the French Republic, and the Bishop of Ordel in freaking Catalonia in Spain. And that guy probably serves for pretty much life, unless he retires or whatever. That guy's old. So, I don't know, because he's like a Catholic. So I guess, technically, you could argue Andorra's a theocracy, considering that one of the positions is a theocratic position, but one of them's a secular position. So, it's arguably a partial secular Catholic state. It's kind of weird to think about. Because the French Republic is not supposed to endorse any religion, but the Bishop of Ordel is a religious position. So arguably, you got a secular prince and you got a non-secular prince in the Principality of Andorra. Well, I call it a co-principality, but it's just called the Principality of Andorra. But the princes don't do anything. They appoint local Andorrans to go and sign off on their laws. So they barely do anything as princes anyway. It's just a weird position they hold. Like, the French president does not care about his position. He cares more about France than he will ever care about Andorra. I guess he's honored to be an Andorran leader, but after 5 years or 10 years, he's gone. There will be a new prince. So it's not really like a true principality in that respect. I would argue it's barely even royalty. But it's very interesting still, the fact that exists, that sort of system exists. There's obviously other monarchies in Europe that I didn't even mention, like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Monaco, Liechtenstein, the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. I obviously didn't mention everything, right? But these are the ones that fascinate me the most, just because of the way that their governments are structured and the way the systems are structured. The fact that there are republican states inside of a monarch federation is so interesting to me in Malaysia. The fact that the monarchy is so much more powerful than the Republicans in Malaysia is just fascinating. And I just find it incredible that Malaysia functions the way it does. I think Indonesia also has a tribal king in one of the states too, which is fascinating. But Malaysia's a republic, but not Malaysia. Indonesia's a republic. Sorry, I'm talking about Indonesia now. Indonesia has this one little kingdom. It's like they took a chunk out of the state and they made it into its own kingdom, because historically it always was. And the king controlled it locally, so they just gave it to him. It's kind of fascinating. But everything else in Indonesia is a republic. You have to vote for your governor in your state or in your certain sector, wherever you're at. I think Indonesia is actually a unitary state. I don't think it's a federation, but I don't know. But yeah, that's the problem. Is some of these countries are super big, should be federations, but the problem is they're not. They're unitary states, meaning they have one central government and they give local governments their autonomy over time. In a federation, the local governments give the federal government power, so it's sort of set up by the smaller states. They give the federal power its authority more. So I'm a bigger fan of federalism than I am of unitarism. I don't like unitary governments, but I obviously live in a federation. You know, the United States is a famous federal republic. But there's a lot of places that are federal monarchies or federal other places or unitary states. China is a big example of a unitary state. They have authoritarianism. They can abolish any parliament in any city in China, except for Hong Kong and Macau. They can abolish any parliament using the force of military. In India, they can't do that. India, the states are very autonomous. United Kingdom, the parliaments are given by the central parliament. Central parliament says, okay, you can make your own parliament now. Scotland now has its own parliament because central parliament gave them that power. So that's kind of fascinating to me, how some governments will this immediately give people power? Russian Federation is a very interesting one. It's a very authoritarian country, but I like that they give their people local autonomy over their language rights and their constitutions. But the problem is the governor is chosen by, again, the president of Russia, who happens to be Vladimir Putin, which is pretty famous for committing, I guess, international crime. I don't know what you call that. But it's fascinating, right? Governments around the world fascinate me. And I don't know what I'm going to title this. Probably the Bangkok, Bareback, Malaysia, and UAE. They just fascinate me. Just federal monarchies fascinate me. I don't know what you call them. I guess it would be federal royalty. I don't know the actual system of them. I don't think anyone has defined their governance systems that well. Like, how do you define what Malaysia and the UAE is? Like, obviously the head of the UAE is a president, but he's the king of a local state. So is he a king of the whole country? I mean, you could argue because he's president for life. You could argue he's a monarch, but I don't know if you could. He can't be a monarch of the whole country. Theoretically, he's not. But he rules the whole country, so theoretically he is. It's just fascinating to me. And then dictatorships are another thing where Kim family basically acts like, Kim Jong-un basically acts like a monarch, but he barely is. There's no royal proceedings or anything, so I guess it's not really a monarchy at that point. You have to have royal proceedings in order to be a monarch. Which a monarch is technically someone who's been chosen by God or chosen by divine right to rule. But the Communist Party says he has divine right because he's the most qualified. So arguably he does have the monarchical position. But whatever, monarchies are so weird. You have to define yourself as a monarch in order to be one. And Kim, since he hasn't said he's a monarch, claims to be a Republican president of the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. When I say Republican, I don't mean the political party. I mean actual republics. Obviously that makes sense, right? So, anyway, I just thought you guys would enjoy this episode. I thought this is fascinating. Hopefully you enjoyed the Bancock Bareback, me talking about weird governments. Goodbye.